Hey, Al McCoy here, and you are listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Suns Show.
And you are watching the Solar Panel Podcast. My name is Tim Tompkins. You can find me on Twitter at RadioTimNBA. No Greg Esposito on this episode. That's okay. We have Dave King, the managing editor of Bright Side of the Sun. You can find him on Twitter at Dave King NBA.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, whichever time of day you're listening to this.
So it has been a good stretch of basketball for the Suns. They've lost a couple at home, although it is worth noting that the teams that they were playing at home during the stretch included the Denver Nuggets, the top of the Western Conference, as well as OKC, again at the top of the Western Conference. And both of those games surprisingly competitive, at least through certain points. The Thunder game, although it was a bit of a bigger loss, the Suns were competitive through the first three quarters, and then just the rails fell off in the fourth quarter. And then, of course, against the Nuggets, the Suns went on that huge run to end the game, bringing the game within 4 points.
Yeah, if this was like Summer League scoring where you got credit for winning quarters, the Suns would have won 6 of 8 quarters. So that would have outweighed the extra point you get for each win. So really, it would have been 6 points to 4 points, and the Suns would be 2-0 on this homestand as of Sunday morning. The Suns won 3 quarters against OKC, and they won overall, and they won 3 quarters overall against Denver. It just happened to be that the 2 bad quarters the Suns had were so bad they couldn't be overcome by 3 other good quarters. They were down by 20 after 1 on Saturday night against Denver, after losing by 20 in the fourth quarter against OKC on Friday night. You take those 2 quarters out, and they won by handy margins on both sides. So let's just pretend that happened, because you know what? We are the kings of focusing on things that are not win and loss related. We are 6 years into the Suns rebuild, 4 full admitted years into the Suns rebuild, and we haven't been able to talk about a winning record once in the last 4 years. So it's been really, really nice to be able to actually watch some Suns wins in the last couple of weeks. So we are going to focus today's podcast, or at least today's intro section that's on YouTube, and the first 20 minutes or so of our pod overall, on some positives. We're going to talk about Suns wins and what the Suns are doing to win games. So what I've seen the Suns doing to win games is, first of all, having healthy Devin Booker and TJ Warren back. That does help a lot. Another thing the Suns have done to win games is play some Eastern Conference teams. That really helps a lot, because in the West, you've got 14 teams who are all vying for playoff spots out of 15 right now. And in the East, you've got maybe a handful of teams at the most. And the Suns finally were able to play some teams that weren't at the top of the East. So,
well, they did get a win against Boston, though.
They did get it. That was a big win. That was the biggest win of the season, beating Boston. Boston was minus a couple of players, including Al Horford, but our rookie DeAndre Ayton had played pretty well against Al Horford in the first contest, where the Suns had a lead until the end of the game and lost to Boston early in the season. So I've got a warm spot in my heart for the Suns road trip, and that's the winningest road trip the Suns have had in 4 years, since Isaiah Thomas was coming off the bench with Gerald Green in what I had dubbed the Chuck Wagon bench unit back in early 2014. So that's the best road trip the Suns have had in all that time. So I'm really enjoying it. The other thing the Suns are starting to do, obviously, on the court is focus on Devin Booker being the main ball handler most of the game, and getting 3 long-armed wings out there with Kelly Oubre, along with Mikal Bridges and Josh Jackson, and getting out there and cutting off passing lanes. Even Devin Booker's getting into the act, and he's gotten a few steals over this last few games as well. So it's been really fun to see. And then DeAndre Ayton developing into a more of a rim presence and defensive presence. So that's been really nice to see.
I also think it's worth noting how much better Josh Jackson has been playing as of late. It looks like he's been within control, playing with them himself most games. Scoring is up, his assist percentage is up, his turnover percentage is down, field goal percentage is up, but he's just looked a lot better out there on the court. And it's been interesting to watch Kelly Oubre specifically and the kind of impact I think that he has on Josh Jackson. It seems like Josh Jackson is taking note that this is a player that I'm competing with for minutes, but he's also playing well with, and it seems like he's taking a lot from that.
Well, I think Josh is seeing the kind of player that he sees himself as. Kelly Oubre is a guy who likes to score when he gets a chance, touching the ball, and he likes to play defense. And that's the kind of thing Josh was supposed to be coming into the league. And also, Kelly Oubre is a really high energy guy. So he's going to run around top speed, just like Josh Jackson has always done. So finally, Josh has a guy who he fits right with, and I think they play very well together. Igor said the other day at practice that he's gonna keep those guys in the second unit together because they play so well together as a tandem. And of course, he's got to figure out all the rotations and deal with foul troubles and stuff like that as they come up. But it's been really nice to be able to see the Suns have several players who all play the same style between Bridges, Jackson, and Oubre, and it just brings everybody else up as well. D'Anthony Melton's been pretty good on help defense. I know Tim wants to talk about D'Anthony just a little bit, but D'Anthony Melton has been pretty good on help defense and getting in passing lanes and an open space, but he's been really struggling with on-ball defense and running the team. Tim, you got more to say about that, or do you want to just let that one go?
So we have a pretty big interview coming up on the show that's not going to be a part of YouTube. You can always go over to our actual podcast and just subscribe there. But so I'm doing a really deep dive, which is the first time that I've done a really deep dive into the stats since the Trevor Ariza trade, partly because I just want to see a large enough sample size. I want to see what the rotations were going to look like. And one thing that stood out to me is D'Anthony Melton. When you add him to nearly any lineup, he's not a positive in nearly any facet. You have the 4-man lineups that once you add him to, all of a sudden become a negative. And I think that that's been really interesting. And just kind of watching him play, he's not really doing point guard things. And I'm not sure if this is because of the way that the offense is designed, if it just reflects on him as the type of player that he is. To your point, Dave, he's been a really good help defender. He hasn't been great on ball, but he has been getting in those passing lanes, but he's just not really doing point guard things. You know, he's only averaging a couple of assists per games. One thing I can note without laying out all of the stats, because they're kind of boring to read, honestly, is that the Suns just straight up have not been better with D'Anthony Melton on the floor. And something you and I talked about via text before getting on this might be the Suns trying something where they're playing Melton more with the second unit along with Crawford and trying out some different lineups like that might be a bit more beneficial than him playing with the starters as much as he has been.
Yeah, I just think the fit with if you're either going to start Devin Booker as the point guard, or you're going to have someone like a D'Anthony Melton in the starting lineup. I just don't like Jamal Crawford next to Devin Booker, and I don't really. Okay, so let's talk about. You could just say you put somebody else entirely, like Elliot Kobo or whatever, in the starting lineup, and have Melton come off the bench with the bench guys. But the problem is then you've got one less veteran out there who can sometimes prop up the bench units. I know people don't like watching Jamal Crawford play. I know most of the time he appears to be a negative out there, but you've got to have, if you've got a guy who's got a really good voice in the locker room, who really has a nice impact on this young team and gets this young team in the right spirit. They all love playing with him. They all think he's a great teammate. And he actually won Teammate of the Year last year, right? For the NBA for Minnesota. I think he's got to be able to still continue to build sweat equity, which means he's got to play. You can't. This happened with Jared Dudley. This happened with Tyson Chandler, where they meant well on what they said, and Ryan Anderson to an extent this year. They mean well, but if they're not actually playing in the games on the court, the players have to give them a little bit less credit on their advice on when you tell a guy what to do right and wrong, or what he was doing wrong and tell him how to do it right. You need to be the one who was out there doing it too, and taking some blame for things and taking some credit for things as well when you deserve it. So I kind of probably went off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I wanted to talk about Jamal Crawford and folks saying that maybe he should be benched or get a lot fewer minutes. He just loses all of his equity in the locker room if he does that.
Yeah, I think what Jamal's been bringing has been good. It's been noticeable, I think, over the last couple of games, him playing at times when before in the rotation he would have been there, and I think that it's been a little bit clearer. Like in the OKC game, for example, I think that Jamal with that second unit's really where the downturn came in that fourth quarter. There was a couple of times where he got switched on with Nerlens Noel, and he tried to take him one-on-one, and Jamal's just simply not the player that he used to be. I mean, he's good, and to your point, he provides a lot of equity in that second unit. Devin Booker and Jamal Crawford on the court together, though, they have been bad. They're like a net rating of like -13 or something like that. That's a backcourt you don't want to see very often.
Right. No, I get it. And it always brings me back to what Igor said a few weeks ago. He's only got so many options with this rotation. Hindsight and foresight is always much more accurate than actual reality. And knowing who's going to play well at any one time, there's only so many options that Igor has for his rotations, and sometimes they work well and sometimes they don't. He's got to think about a lot of things at once. And yes, sometimes he gets stubborn during the games, but when he has time to think about it, like Jamal played a lot fewer minutes on Saturday than he did Friday. Part of that is because he has that lingering knee issue and he's older, but also part could be his ineffectiveness from Friday night. But during the game, Igor is not going to be like a fan on Twitter or in the Brightside comment sections where he's just like, oh, that guy had a bad play, sit him. Igor's going to stay with the guy and let him play through it a little bit. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So
I prepping for this interview that we have coming up, I was looking at the shot frequency chart, not the shot percentage chart, but the shot frequency chart with Devin Booker. And he has not taken a single corner three all season.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
not one.
I was thinking about that a little bit when I saw you mention it earlier on the Twitter. And I guess it's part of the offense this year. Devin has talked about he sees the floor a lot better when he's on a wing, when he's out on the floor, on the wings or at the top of the key. And so that's where he's spending all of his time. But I think it's interesting that he's never once dove into the corner after a dribble handoff and taken a pass from another guard into the in the corner and taking an open three. That's just wild. That's wild.
Just by accident.
Yeah.
In the flow.
I mean, that used to be a staple. It used to be a staple of the Suns' offense. So I'll have to watch a little bit closer on what they're doing. I guess they're always running Booker down to the baseline, but then back up on curls to get the ball in his hands, and down screens and all that to get the ball back in his hands, and he doesn't just sit in the corner. Partially because the Suns don't have another reliable playmaker, which is also partially the reason Jamal Crawford is getting playing time, because at least the coach knows that Jamal won't be throwing the ball away all the time, although he did a couple of times against Nerlens Noel on Friday. But it is, God, you would think. Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure that's how I was looking at. So if someone can run this for me, because I don't feel like doing it and I might not know how, it doesn't mean I couldn't figure it out. Is there another player in the NBA this season averaging more than 1 3 a game that hasn't taken a single corner three?
Yeah, that's I'd like to see that in the comments on Brightside on who's going to actually look that up and figure that out. That's crazy. But it is just a staple. So it used to be a total staple of the Suns' offense to do that offense, to have the point guard.
Bridges gets a ton of corner threes,
and he's terrible at them. When is he going to get better at the corner threes? The dude is a 40% lifetime shooter in college, and he's doing well on the wings for the Suns. But Bridges is like shooting 22 or 20% on corner threes this year, and the corner three is usually the easiest 3-point shot to take. So I'm not sure how that's possible.
We're kind of coming up on time. Do you want to talk about DeAndre Ayton's big 24-point quarter? Is that what it was? 24-point quarter? The Suns put up there's this new movie out, Bird Box, is on Netflix. I'm sure everyone's seen it. Everyone's seen the memes Um, the Suns Twitter or the Suns Instagram, man, they got jokes talking about nobody talking about DeAndre Ayton's big
Yeah.
quarter.
I mean, okay, so obviously the NBA tweeted and stuff like that, but if other rookies would have had a 24-point quarter, then the Twitter sphere would be going crazy with it. DeAndre Ayton gets them, and people go, "Oh, he's just he just had some good opportunities." So yeah, it's interesting. DeAndre has Devin Booker has set the Suns record for points in a quarter at 27, and DeAndre Ayton as a rookie is the youngest is the only rookie with a 24-point quarter in Suns history.
Just to bring it back really quick, just looked it up, and Mikal Bridges is shooting 31% from the corner three, putting him in the 20 percentile. Non-corner threes, he's shooting 41%, putting him in the 86 percentile. So to your point, Dave, he is just exceptionally better at non-corner threes.
And that's just wild.
When I was watching that quarter with Ayton, it stood out to me thinking, and Ayton has his defensive issues, and we've talked enough about those, so it doesn't really matter. We're all aware he's getting a little bit better, yada, yada, yada. But on the offensive end, I was just thinking, imagine him playing with an actual point guard. How much better he would be, because it's hard to judge players, and this is something that I harped on the Sixers a lot back when they had Jalil. Is it's really hard to judge big men specifically who don't have a point guard around them.
So I've got a beef with this, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, Tim, but I've got a beef with this. The beef I have with it isn't necessarily that whether DeAndre Ayton would be better with a point guard or not. The beef I have is that he is about the most productive 20-year-old big man we've had since, as far as productivity, as far as scoring and rebounding and things like that. He's the most productive that the Suns have had since Amari Stoudemire, and I don't even think Amari approached these numbers as a rookie. And then, it's really Shaquille O'Neal is the last one who did anything like DeAndre Ayton is doing productivity-wise. And then you make the Jahlil Okafor comparison, and that is not a comparison to me, because Okafor was always short on athleticism and never really was self-aware enough to improve and work on his defense. Whereas Ayton is constantly thinking about it, and that's his problem. Is some of it is he's overthinking.
Well, yeah, I'm just talking.
I don't think that's an apt comparison. I know other people have made that, but I want to go off on a tangent just for a second, and then we're gonna have to cut out the YouTube thing and go on to our regular podcast with our interview, our big interview. But the comment I want to make is I see a lot of the word "finally" with DeAndre Ayton playing a little bit better defense inside. And offensive rebounding, the Suns are third in offensive rebounding during their stretch of playing well. And that's almost all because of DeAndre Ayton. You can't say finally about a guy in his 30th game as a 20-year-old in the NBA. That's not finally. That's like a natural, really fast progression. That's like saying finally Igor found a pretty good rotation with a half a dozen NBA players on a 15-man roster. That's natural, fast progression. So can we get off the finally and go into just appreciating what we have instead of always wishing we had the next? And now people are saying, well, he's going to have to do the 30-15 games a lot more often for me to know it's consistent. Did you see the tweet out there that somebody looked up that that the only rookies who have had 33 and 14 games were like two. Shaquille O'Neal is one of them that have ever had 33 and 14 games. Blake Griffin had two. Shaquille O'Neal had two. And that's it.
I will end it with this stat right here. And this is the top 7 rookies. Only 23 rookies have ever averaged 16 and 10 shooting at least 50% true shooting percentage. Number 7, Tim Duncan in 97-98 with a true shooting percentage of 57%. Jerry Lucas in 1963-64, true shooting percentage of 57%. Shaquille O'Neal, 92-93. Alonzo Mourning, 92-93. Karl Anthony Towns, 2015-2016. David Robinson, 1989-1990. And DeAndre Ayton, leads that entire list of center rookies with a 62% true shooting percentage, averaging 16 points, at least 10 rebounds, and 2 assists a game on top of it, which those other centers did not have. He has arguably been the best offensive center in his rookie year in NBA history.
Yeah, so maybe we should stop using the words finally and I wish he'd get better at this and I wish they had that, and maybe just appreciate what we have. Okay, on that.